government savings would then be generated. Society is stepping away from the last 50 years, and we note in the article, Taming the Leviathan, the state is almost everywhere inefficient and broke. It need to be, says John Micklethwait of The Economist. The argument sounds familiar. Disruptive reforms have so changed the private sector should now be let loose on the public sector. The relationship between government and civil society is between master and servant. Instead, it should be partnership with the state creating the right environment for companies and charities to do more of the work. The conclusion, we are in a transition from a big state to a small state and from a small society to a big society. Is this the Republican candidate for America saying this? David Cameron running the British Tories? Neither. The Speaker was supposedly China's most highly awarded bureaucrat who won the country's national award for government innovation. And what she's talking about is non-government organisation taking over parts of the health and education services. This is what the church founded such organisations that we already heard: Salvation Army, Mission Australia, Society of Vincent de Paul, Anglicare, etc. Let's talk about tax. Tax reduces the velocity of money. The more money that circulates in the economy, the greater the benefit. Tax is leakage. The disadvantage of taxing the church is the lost effectiveness in the work it does. Taxing the church just reduces the amount of money flowing into the community action arms. If you believe that the fair share of taxes to be paid, you may as well charge the Scouts and other not-for-profit organisations as well. Let me take the example of Mission Australia, who last week won the Pricewaterhouse Transparency Award for our 2009-10 accounts. I am with the gentleman here. I believe we should have more transparent accountability. It's not something I resile from, and we as a Mission Australia organisation step out there proudly and wish private companies, etc. would also do the same. A lot of churches already publish their information. It's at general meetings. Every church, parish church, publishes their information annually or quarterly. My colleague Peter Madden has already put forward the argument that it's not about tax, it's about beliefs. The tax argument is a Trojan horse to weaken the church and the work it does for society's benefit. As Nicky Gumbel said, we should welcome the debate, not fear it, but be clear on the agenda. Lies are just a twisted truth. The injudicious use of statistics can be such an accident. Fairness is in the eye of the beholder. Governments over the past 200 years have ascribed value to the church and the work it does in the community, and Mr. Seppham agrees. It is obviously of higher value than the tax that we gain. Let us not forget the church set up most of the institutions here in Australia before handing them over to government. If the populists disagree, they can vote for change. I leave with this last thought. To my opponents, never be afraid of trying something new. Remember, amateurs built the Ark. Professionals built the Titanic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, speaking of the inspiring charitable works provided by the church, and the tax is leakage detracting from these charitable works. All right, let's hear from the affirmative team for a 5-minute rebuttal. That's
well, there are so many points raised by both the speakers, so I can only, in the space of 5 minutes, deal with a few of them. And I have to say straight up that I found Peter's presentation so aggressive and hostile. If one comes to a debate like this, so wound up and so aggressive, you wonder as to whether the speaker is really, how shall I say, convinced of their own argument.
Passionate.
One thing I'd like to say straight up is that it's simply crazy to deny that the churches don't get a tax benefit, a substantial tax benefit. This was acknowledged by Professor Bishop Tom Frame in his book Losing My Religion, where he calculates that religion costs Australia $40 billion a year. And there are other clerics who've been honest about it, including Catholic bishops and so forth. So let's not pretend that it doesn't happen. I'd like to speak briefly about World Youth Day, which Peter raised. It did, in fact, cost more than $20 million, if I've heard you correctly. The $20 million was from the federal government. The amount that the New South Wales government paid is, we think, something between $80 and $100 million. We don't know because the New South Wales government refused to respond to a Freedom of Information request from the Sydney Morning Herald about how much it did cost. With respect to the money that it may have generated, I point out that most of the pilgrims that came stayed in private residences. They weren't in backpackers' hostels, and not the majority of them at least, or in hotels or anything like that. And a lot of businesses were complaining in Sydney that they had to shut down because of the security for World Youth Day. Now, I think both our opponents weren't apprised of pretty much what our argument was going to be tonight, that we don't oppose the good works of charitable organisations that are the arms, the charitable arms of the mainstream churches. What we're saying is that there is a point of principle here that government should not support any kind of belief, and as I said in my paper, whether it's a religious belief or whether it's atheism, government should be dispassionate and impartial, and it shouldn't favour one side, one kind of belief or another. That's what I think a secular government should be about, and I reject the misdefinition of secularism as a form of atheism. In fact, I think Peter made the point that religion should not dominate the state. Well, and neither should atheism. I think that's something on which we agree. And we don't have a constitutional separation of church and state in Australia at either a federal or state level, but we certainly need one. And I was misquoted in terms of the kinds of things that go on in the United States. It's healthy from time to time for there to be a High Court dispute about the government expenditures with respect to religion, and that's happening for the first time in 30 years now with the chaplaincy case before the High Court, where the federal government is spending about $400 million on placing religious chaplains in state schools. Now, not counsellors, religious chaplains. Now, if you want to have chaplains in religious schools, by all means, of course, but it's a bit rich for religious organisations to do the reverse of what our opponents are saying and attempt to infiltrate the state school system to promote their proselytisation. So let me just finish on this point that I think our opponents have missed the central idea of the debate tonight, that we're trying to distinguish religion from the charitable arms of religious organisations, and we just want to speak to that point of principle. Thank you.
Thanks, Wallace. Now, who do we have to respond? Is it the passionate Peter Madden or the aggressive Peter Madden? Or not? Charles,
You can have all of that.
Which one?
Well, I'll respond.
Peter Madden.
Please excuse my passion. I am a passionate man. I make no excuse for it. I'm not an angry man, but I have a passion because to a large extent in Australia, the church has lost its voice. To a large extent in our government and our media, the church, which once was the bastion and the foundation of our society, had a great voice, and it has been eroded, and it has been declined, and it has been pushed to the side. I will speak loudly, I will speak firmly. I don't speak aggressively, except to say that in a debate, yes, you have two sides. You have two sides coming from two totally different perspectives. If we don't have passion, I would put to my learned opponent, the author Max Wallace, you don't really believe your arguments.